We're honored to have with us Elvira Dyangani Ose, Director of the Barcelona Museum of Contemporary Art, who will close this beautiful discussion by presenting what is a possible museum. Elvira.
Just realized that I didn't learn quickly how to say hello or good afternoon in Greek, so you will have to forgive me. Instead, I'm going to say it in Spanish and in Catalan. Buenas tardes, buenas tardes, ¿cómo están? Close enough. Let me see if I can just open my notes and be here. Well, it's a bit intimidating being the last speaker of this incredible day. I want to thank, while I'm doing these prosaic things that one has to do to open up the notes, to thank so much to Cristina Ward, who was with us in conversations since the very beginning, but also to Maria, Dina, Caterina, all the authorities and colleagues from museums that have made possible not my coming here to Athens for the first time, believe it or not, but also to be able to be part of the conversation with you. So I'm very, very grateful. And I want to say that some of the things that I would like to do, and I know we're late, and I think one of the reasons that I found very enlightened to be able to be with you now after a long day is that I would like to send more questions out or prompters that could help us to the conversations that we will have informally later on. I feel like keynotes sometimes are lacking of something that for me is very important, which is the conversation. So I hope that if after my words and remarks or in the bar, we can have one or many. I'll leave you 2 seconds to read this through. I was working in Gothenburg a while ago. I would say it's now almost 8 years, to prepare a project that was called A Story Within a Story, and in which we were talking about how, and among many subjects, how history had made this subject, and what will happen when one's take on the possibility of imagining history as a participatory item. And I thought when I was invited to think about what will have to happen in a museum like MACBA with a specific idiosyncrasy, but at the same time big enough to allow the opportunity to move towards whatever that one can imagine in terms of authorship and creativity, that I will use this sense of the power in the story that Michel Roth-Troyot, the late anthropologist, thought to consider. So imagine that if we were to consider Troyot's statement in a museological context, history will be the history of art, academic history will be the art institution as a side of cultural production, and the professional's historian's role will be shared with various degrees of capacity and responsibility between several experts that constitute the agents of daily experience of any museums, starting with the artists, but also museum directors, department heads, conservators, curators, archivists, educators, and so on and so forth. Central to the thought is the fact that, at least in theory, museums have long acknowledged the role of the potential artisans, as Troyot is saying here, in their history making and in the pursuit of articulating as its very core specific collective agencies and values, right? So in a way, when I was thinking what to do with the museum. No? This is before meeting all my colleagues. I was thinking, okay, so we need to recognize visitors, or better said, viewers of users, participants, neighbors, skaters, tourists, communities, and even the clueless passerby of his raison d'etre, the raison d'etre of the museum. The nucleus of a network of concentric circles around which all the activities, vision, mission, values, and the future of the museum revolve. It is to that sense of the common and the collective, to the plurality of it offers, and for the formulation of a museum that is permeable to several knowledges, skillfulness, and experience that those at time unpaid, unrecognized laborers, who might, as Troyo said, augment, deflate, or reorganize the work the museum aims to deploy, to which this moment of conversation and this declaration that I made at the time for MACBA as a museum yet to come was devoted. And this is, in case you don't know where we are, one of the key things for the opening of the museum is the idea that the museum started in 1995. In fact, in a couple of years, we celebrate our anniversary. And instead of that moment, which was called the Pacto Cultural, Pacta Cultural, which is the cultural agreement, which established the conditions by which authorities from the regional government, the city government, and later on the national government will get into agreement with members of the civic society. But this pact ultimate purpose was to develop a new cultural policies beyond the political spectrum leading to the constitution of the museum. But to me, left outside, the whole thing was to avoid the dichotomies that sometimes happen in political culture. So it was a moment of agreement into all these different parties. But as I say, for me, there was something greater that was left out, which was whatever was happening in the city before, right? Let's say the sites of production, the conceptualization of MACBA would have been, if we take in consideration all the context occurring in 1980s, in the mid of 1980s, right? There was a condition of possibility for the museum to emerge as the birthplace of some of the most experimental, more transdisciplinary aspects and practices and discourses that led to the formation of what we can recognize as MACBA today. And in a way, this has to be part of what we were aiming for, no? Whom are institutions for, right? What are the institutions and who do they serve, no? And who do we serve if we consider ourselves the institution? And I mean, the first users of the institution, I think, are the team. And I think that was a critical issue. So we started thinking about the possible museum as a way to approach anew the institution. Because, of course, one of the collateral effects of growing prominence in curating within the field of art production has been the transformation of the artistic director into an authorial figure who must leave their signature on the museum. No? The arrival of a new leadership is often heralded as that a new individual vision that will reshape the institution in their image, making a new era that owes little to the past. No? This way of understanding the function of the director not only legitimates and serves to perpetuate extreme hierarchical and vertical relationship of power, but also diminishes all the existing knowledge. So our intention imagining the future possible museum was mainly to generate the necessary time and space to take off in another direction, generated a context of listening and mutual learning among the broad community that makes the museum, of which management is only part of it, right? And conceiving from the beginning, in the medium term, no, we started with this consideration of the museum, the possible museum, of a possible museum. So in English, it's a bit funny because you say a possible museum, but in Spanish, it's el museo posible, which talks about its improbability, it talks about the probability, it talks about the condition of possibility. And thinking about the counterculture as a part of that dialogue, what allowed us is to imagining what is happening, not only as a way to address the past, but also to significantly admit that everything that is happening nowadays needs to be put in dialogue with a context where that is normative in terms of other alliances in institutional, no, in an institutional milieu, or whether it's a countercultural imagery. So anyhow, so the Sendia artist and the Pablo Olguera here also has to do with with some of the things that I was talking about earlier when we talk about the authorial figure, in which sometimes, in which sometimes what was occurring was that the museum was listening in terms of a programming, but it wasn't transforming the institution structure or system. So the possible museum started as a way to denaturalize habits and norms that has ceased to be questioned and enable the practice of thinking collectively about other forms of doing, right? Far from starting with a clean slate, it will share existing knowledge to try to identify what will still needed within the history of the institution in mind. And I'm using all of this because, of course, you know that for a while we talk a lot about participation in a very neoliberal way, and I wanted just to put these images, which I think it was the first time that Marcus Miesen, a colleague researcher at Goldsmith, was starting to spread out some of the formulation of the non-participation attitude, I will say, institutional attitude. But of course, Noor Abouf and other people had talked about the Museum of Non-Participation, or people like, I'm now forgetting the name, but there is a beautiful book against the romance of community, which also talks about this neoliberal participation as a neoliberal trend in which we are forced to engage, right? But of course, subverting men, as you see, and this is one of the outcomes, a poster that was one of the outcomes of the agencias, no, and a collective agency as one of the fine arts. No? So these are some of the prompts I was saying that are important for us. So nothing related to the museum is longer evident. The task of the coming year is to reinvent the institution. And the reinvention in our case starts by asking our colleagues, how are we doing? Where are they expecting of the museum to be? What they would like the museum to become, right? And in some cases, those questions were never asked beyond management or beyond the direction, or were asked within processes of participatory engagement, but then none of these aspects were somehow coming out as a proposal. One of the things that we also did to begin with was to transform the collection setup and trying to bring together some of the ideas that will mean to again, break with the grammar of the institution as such. And in order to do that, we started this presentation. So before I arrived, there was a presentation that was very much looking at our history narrative, in which, to my take, the work were mere instrument or illustration of a position or an era or a period in our history. And I felt that that did very little to what was the poetic of the museum. And in a way, we were forced to consider whether there was something else we could do to return works at the center of the discussion and to give some agency also to the viewer. So one of the things that we started thinking about was to contest, in a way, the role of the museum itself, and we invented this project, Prelude, because it was supposed to be the, let's say, the avant-chambre to what it is to come in terms of the exhibition making. And I was some people were saying, well, why you start so quickly to work on the exhibition of the collection? And I say, I'll do it because I think that also, no, my program is not only what I present in the rooms, is the institution itself, although as Gilberto González, director of TEA, will say at some point, we all, the institution speak through its program, no? And this is, for instance, talking about justice, this is where some of our positions come up, right? So what will happen if we disassociate the artwork from the museographic context that surrounds we as ourselves? Could we, if that possibility really existed, respond to the will of the work, to its desire and energy, to its poetic intention? Taking the title from the eponymous book by the Martinican poet and philosopher Edouard Glissant, Poetic Intention, is conceived as an exercise of disruption from the museum institutional framework, offering a space of reflection and critique where art, both as a concept and also as experience, is formulated as an emancipatory force. This new approach to the collection features, to a large extent, artworks, and this was very important to us, acquired in recent years to see new spaces for coexistence with existing works in the collection, but also entering the museum for the first time, making the narrative and the context permeable and open, right? The idea was to create a dialogue with the building itself, like in the case of this work, but also others that I cannot show you, with the extension of the pillar by Luz Broto, that will, if you have come to the Richard Mayer building in MACBA campus, there is something very interesting that happened, no? That the Mayer building invite you, as you saw earlier, no, to go through this ramp, which in a way take you far away from the time and the reality of the city that you see, no? And the more you go towards the room, the more the plaza with the skaters, with the everyday life gets removed from you. And that sense that you are entering in a different kind of narrative was also very important to have, no? This sense of the museum time and how we move through it, how we wander the exhibition and the artworks take us on a journey as the artwork conceived as context and storytellers, right? They formulate a story, and the story brought the light here, one work at a time. The idea that we are leading and guiding people through exhibition is really an old proposition when, at least I do, I start always from the back, or I decided to go and take a work as the beginning of my journey. I think one of the things that we wanted for people to engage with was the possibility to, I'm going to quickly take that out, for the people to really be able to move from one place to the other strategically without thinking about anything else. And really our purpose is to, there was something in this morning somebody was saying, I think it was in the first round table, no? Talking about the idea of bringing people's sense of belonging, how we can appeal to those that does not feel interpellated by the museum. Right? I think that's a critical question. If we talk about justice and accessibility, we need to be radically public. But what that means, if we are a public institution, everything we do in terms of activities is already public. We had to do more in terms of how our spaces could be spaces of exchange, spaces to rest, spaces to hide, right? These are things that we need to consider. And this idea that MACBA can be yours, can be your possible museum, is very much rooted in that sense. No? We also question the museum as one of modernity's institutions that carries together within it its dilemmas and also its prerogatives. No? Despite its constant renewal and self-critique, the museum today is still conditioned by its fundamental origins as a colonial apparatus and object center. In recent decades, however, museums have expanded the capacity to reinvent themselves, blurring the established limits, attempted to do it at the very least, becoming an idea center, a laboratory space, aware of its interdependence with other sociopolitical, artistic, cultural, and economic contexts. In other words, museums have become more malleable institutions where ideas and concepts are interwoven with other experience of observation and participation, right? But these opportunities that we see, and I see this as a critique also to some of the things that we have been doing. We had to give access to the museum that had to give away with its own possibility of being relevant to the communities that are part of it in turn. And in this case, I'm going to take 2 or more or so minutes because I see that I'm 3 seconds away, 1, 0. So I'm going to take some time just to explain this. As part of the project of Teresa Lanceta, we work with the people in the Department of Education. We work on with the families, students, and the teaching board, the faculty of institution, education institution that is very close to the museum, the Institut Miquel Tarradell, and they were the ones presenting the show in different language. Imagine in Raval, in Barcelona, there are 11 official languages that people speak, and although we normally, officially in the institution speak Catalan, Spanish, English, and sometimes French and Italian. We try in the context of several of the exhibition and of course in our public program, bring up the rest of the other 7 languages that are in town. And here you have Los Oficios del Raval. One key important thing, and I think somebody else said it this morning, that is extremely important is time. No? I don't know if you know Iñaki Gabilondo, who is an old, I say old because he's in his 80s, but also old because he's well known to the Spanish journalist community. And he was saying that in order to create an atmosphere and a universe of trust, you need decency, honesty, and also time. And this project took 3 years, 2 academic courses to take place, but for us was the way in which we could connect with some of the individuals close to us. Of course, the program also, like in the case of the exhibition of Bushra Halili, put us closer to the Maghrebi community because some of the stories she relates to are those, particularly the commission that we did with Lumar Foundation and Sharjah Foundation, the circle. But also, and I think this is important, no? How we are connected to the context, most importantly. Again, many projects that take on the space, that remind us what we can do when we come together with our collective agency, but also, as I was saying, when we bring together critical stories that are, as somebody was saying early in the morning, we are confronted with issues as justice that had to do with us today, with the prerogatives of the present, but also with historical aspect of the past. And this is our newest project, which is the first time that the museum dedicate, together with the Quina, but a space for the community to gather in a co-responsible, co-product space, which is the ambulant garden, the mobile garden. And of course, if we think about who we are, I think that's where the project greatness reside. And I just want to say, I guess this is a video. I guess this lunch, in any case, before it does, just want to say that the possible museum is not only the museum that could be, but is not, the ideal projection of some unfulfilled desire. A possible museum is also what can be done, the framework of possibility that open up, yet still restricted by what is already there, what it already exists. It is neither the avant-garde impulse to produce anew while rejecting the past, nor the conservative instinct to perpetuate what is already established, but the affection with which we can take care of something for its own good, not only and not always to make it grow. And let's see if we can see this video, which I don't know if I had to click again or I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elvira.